Moroccans head to the polls for the 10th general election since independence in 1956. It's only the second ballot since the kingdom adopted constitutional reforms designed to calm protests during the Arab Spring. Insight Sarah Firth looks on as 16 million registered voters get ready to shape a new political map for Morocco.
In 2011, the world watched as the Arab Spring saw millions of people rise up against oppression and tyranny and bring down dictators. Despite facing similar protests, one country was an exception. The North African Kingdom of Morocco managed to steer a very different course. Unlike the rulers in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt, who were overthrown by the Arab Spring uprisings, Morocco's king managed to ride out the popular protests by in part handing some power over to government. Now, the upcoming elections will be just the second since those 2011 protests, and all eyes are going to be on whether Morocco is able to maintain the stability that stands in such stark contrast to the rest of the region. It was in a referendum in 2011, at the height of the protests, that a new constitution was approved, handing over powers that meant the country's prime minister was allowed to appoint government officials and dissolve parliament, powers previously only held by the king. This proved crucial.
It was the comprehensiveness of the constitution which was offered, and the fact that it was so quick managed to take the wind out of the sails of the protest movement before it could really start to escalate to pose a threat to the government.
16 million people are registered to vote in the upcoming elections, with candidates from more than 30 parties competing for seats. But the main battle is between the ruling Islamist Justice and Development Party, the PJD.
We won't jeopardise our country nor our monarchy, which is the anchor of our stability after God.
And the liberal opposition Authenticity and Modernity Party, PAM.
The slogan of our campaign is written behind me: change is now.
The multi-party system in Morocco makes it impossible for any political party to win an absolute majority, forcing any winning party to form a coalition. But despite the new constitution and the more reformist nature of the monarchy, the king is still firmly in charge. Journalists and activists who criticise the monarchy say that puts them at risk, and Reporters Without Borders considers Morocco less free even than Afghanistan. And there are other problems too.
There are still elements within the Moroccan protest movement that want much more power taken away from the king and given to the legislature. There are currently discussions within Morocco about the role Islamism plays. The government as it stands is a moderate Islamist movement. But I wouldn't say that these tensions or these discussions in the state are particularly destabilising.
Compared to its neighbours in the Arab world, and Morocco appears pretty stable. The hope for many now is that these elections will keep the country that achieved a gentle revolution on a peaceful path. Sarah Firth, reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined in Morocco by Skype with the analyst and activist Dr. Leila Fati. Leila, a few days to go until voters go to the polls. Do you think another coalition government could be formed as a result?
Well, that's the particularity of this election. So, of course, there are some main things that were put forth as being the main demands of the population. First one being the economical growth of the country, which has acknowledged a bit of a slow path this years. Also, the external cooperation of Morocco with other countries. There is the issue of the integration of Morocco in the African Union. and also some more domestic issues such as the right of women, the right of freedom of expression, the right of marginalized population, and also development of the most marginalized part of Morocco. However, these issues haven't really been the main themes of this campaign. As the weeks went by, quickly, the main issues that were debated were about small and personal affairs that came up throughout this week, such as issues of corruption, issues of adultery, issues of interference or problem of interest of some of the people who were trying. Sorry, I have to rephrase this, but also some issue of transparency during the campaign, and so it has stalled on the election and the main debate that should have been discussed, which as a result didn't really match with the need and the expectation of the population, and that led also to a lot of frustration.
What do you think will be the consequence of that? Will people reject the politicians who are talking about other things and vote for maybe the smaller parties? Or do you think they will just shrug their shoulders and say, well, I'll stay with what I know?
Well, there is also a third way, which is abstention. And there is the fear that a lot of people will abstain from voting. In the best scenario, we would have this willingness to vote for a third way, which is mostly represented by the Front Démocratique de Gauche, the party of Nabila Mounib and Omar Ben Atresh. However, there is always this threat of abstention, bearing in mind also that Morocco, the culture of voting is being pushed by the king through the democratization of the country since 2011. And there is also a lot of illettrism, and there is also deflagration of parties. The election has so many parties that it's going to be very difficult for the people to be interested in the election if the real issue that matters for them are not addressed. And the fear is that actually there will be high rates in abstention.
There are some rules, I think, about trying to bring more women involved in politics in Morocco, to encourage women to stand for election. Are they working well?
Well, we could say that they are working very well. Of course, we will have to wait the end of election and then how the parliament will be composed. But there are already some prominent women being put in the front of the line and who are holding the parties that they are representing. And I'm thinking notably of Nabila Mounib, who is the face of the Front Démocratique de Gauche, which is a very democratic party which has very progressive ideas. And this shows that there is an openness of the kingdom and also a readiness of the people to see women faces in representative positions.
Dr. Leila Fati, thank you very much for being our guest today.